There's a certain kind of commentary that gets more interesting the further it moves from the palace gates. Not less credible, just differently angled. And every once in a while, someone from a completely unexpected corner of the media world says something about the royal story that royal commentators, deep in their own well-worn talking points, somehow missed entirely.
I think they're a beautiful couple, and they've done a lot of good work around the world. And I think, especially Meghan Markle, I don't know why everybody in the UK is always so up in arms about her.
Complete surprise to us, isn't it? And it doesn't fill me with joy, doesn't fill me with sadness.
Well, some mixed feelings there from Londoners about the news that Prince Harry and Meghan plan to move back to the UK. Buckingham Palace confirmed that the couple will return with their children 6 years after stepping back from royal life. The palace said the Duke and Duchess of Sussex will live as private citizens and will not resume official duties for the monarchy. British Prime Minister Andy Burnham says security arrangements for the royal couple are a private matter. It's been a contentious matter, too, for Harry since he lost protection after stepping down from royal duties in 2020. The move back to the UK follows a recent reunion of sorts with King Charles, but tensions reportedly remain high between Prince William and Harry. So here to chat a bit more about the royal move is Dominic Patton. He's an executive editor at Deadline.com, and he's in LA. Dominic, what do you think we're seeing here?
Well, I think we're seeing a tide shift for sure. I mean, just as recently as May, Harry said that he couldn't conceive of any notion or any reality where he would be back in the UK. Clearly, him and Meghan Markle, when they came to the United States out here on the West Coast, just not that far from LA, actually, they conducted that primetime interview with Oprah just after Queen Elizabeth II's death. They had a best-selling memoir. Harry had a best-selling memoir, Spare. They had Netflix series, audiobooks, all sorts of lifestyle products and what have you. And then the flower and the bloom kind of left. And I think that they encountered some of the realities that everyone encounters when they rise to fame in Hollywood, which is at a point the caravan moves on. I also think there's another matter here. And I think for all of those discussions about their career, all of those discussions about King Charles's cancer and whatever, there's another reality here that some of us might relate to a bit more than others. They are the parents of 2 young children. Their young children have been registered to begin school in the UK next month. That is clearly one of the major reasons why they are moving back to the UK. And as someone who's witnessed the American education system up close and personal, I think probably there might be some things that they want to encourage for their children back home in the UK. So I think that's a big factor in what we're looking at here. But the interest and outrage and sometimes affection is still amazing.
Right. I was just going to say, do you think we're seeing the continuation or the beginning of a royal reconciliation here, or is this still Splitsville?
I think there's a couple of things. I think it can be 2 things simultaneously. I think that clearly there is still a lot of animosity between Prince William, the heir, and Prince Harry, certainly based on some of the things that were in Harry's book. However, Prince Andrew is no longer a part of the royal family for all practical matters because of his association with Jeffrey Epstein. Princess Anne is getting on a little bit in years, so she's not as active as she used to be. And various other members of the royal family have also aged out, so to speak. So the royal families, they're thinning out a little bit. So having Harry and Meghan back, whether or not they're going back to official royal HRH duties right away or later, which I think is what will happen, I think that getting them back in the fold is a part of what the royal family needs to do. And remember, as Canadians, we always think of them as such an institution, but the royal family has actually been a very fluid organization for several hundred years. Just the amount of access that Queen Elizabeth II allowed to television, to her out in the public, et cetera, et cetera. Then we saw Diana, and now we see the boys, and more. So I think this is an evolution of that process and staying within the confines of the firm, as they call it.
But still, this has been an especially public and at times almost vicious family feud, particularly between the brothers and the brothers' wives. These things, it'll take a lot to patch it up, I'm guessing.
Well, look, we all assume that. Whatever, as we all know, what happens actually behind closed doors in families is often very different than what we think. What we do know is it's been a very contentious relationship with Harry and the tabloid press of the UK. Since the moment they landed here in the United States, Harry and Meghan pled for privacy, and then they made a documentary about it, and pled for privacy, and wrote a book about it, and did a podcast about it, et cetera, et cetera. Harry actually sued UK tabloids several times, unsuccessfully, I might add, most recently. So he's going back into the hailstorm, so to speak. On that level, that's where the real reconciliation may or may not happen. And we also might see some of a more of a young person's approach.
I think we lost you for a second there, Dominic, but great thoughts, and thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Deep
Thank you.
in their own well-worn talking points, somehow missed entirely. Welcome back to the Royal Truth Desk, the channel where we dig past the surface-level headlines to figure out what's actually going on. Today, we're looking at a genuinely interesting angle on the ongoing Harry and Meghan return conversation, this time coming from an unexpected source: entertainment and Hollywood commentator Dominic Patton. Because sometimes the freshest read on a very British story comes from someone who spends most of their time watching a completely different industry. Let's set the stage first. The idea of Harry and Meghan potentially spending more time in Britain again isn't new. We've covered various angles of it before. What makes this particular discussion worth its own video is the specific lens it's viewed through. Patton's world is entertainment, celebrity, industry perception, and public image management on a global scale, not royal protocol or palace politics. And that outsider's perspective ends up asking a different set of questions than the usual royal watcher circuit tends to ask. Here's the core idea worth sitting with. Most coverage of a potential Harry and Meghan return frames it as a binary question. Are they coming back or not? Is this reconciliation or not? But Patton's read from what's being discussed pushes towards something more nuanced. The idea that this isn't necessarily about returning in the traditional sense at all. It might be about the Sussexes building an entirely new kind of relationship with Britain, one that doesn't map neatly onto either full working royal or estranged and distant. Something more like an independent lane that runs parallel to the family rather than back inside it. That distinction matters more than it might initially sound like. For years, public conversation has treated this story like there are only two available outcomes. Either Harry and Meghan fully rejoin royal life, complete with duties and protocol, or they remain permanently separate, visiting occasionally under a cloud of tension and scrutiny. But there's a third option that rarely gets discussed with the seriousness it deserves. A version where Harry maintains close, regular connection to Britain, its causes and its people, entirely on his own terms, without ever needing to formally return to anything. This is where the entertainment industry lens becomes genuinely useful. Patton's world deals constantly with public figures who maintain complex, sometimes contradictory relationships with institutions, industries, and audiences. People who step away from one system without fully disappearing from public life, who build entirely new versions of their public identity, rather than either fully returning to or fully rejecting where they came from. Looking at Harry and Meghan through that lens, rather than through a strictly royal one, opens up possibilities that pure royal commentary sometimes misses because it's too locked into in the family versus out of the family thinking. Let's talk about the British press angle, because this is where things get genuinely complicated. Harry's relationship with British tabloid media has been, to put it mildly, adversarial for years. Legal battles, public statements, entire chunks of a memoir dedicated to it. Any meaningful increase in his UK presence runs directly into this unresolved tension. You can't talk seriously about Harry spending more time in Britain without immediately confronting the fact that a significant portion of the British media landscape has an openly hostile, deeply complicated history with him. This is where the Hollywood-adjacent perspective adds something useful again, because managing a complicated media relationship while still maintaining public visibility isn't a uniquely royal problem. It's something plenty of public figures navigate, often successfully, through careful boundary setting, selective engagement, and simply refusing to let hostile coverage dictate their choices. Whether Harry can pull that off in the specifically brutal context of British tabloid culture is a genuinely open question, but it's not an unprecedented one. And then, inevitably, we land back on security, because every single conversation about Harry returning to Britain eventually has to. This remains the most practically important, least glamorous part of the entire story. And it's not going away just because a new commentary angle has entered the conversation. Whatever vision anyone has for a more independent, more frequent Sussex presence in the UK, none of it works without a resolved, workable security arrangement. It's the unglamorous infrastructure underneath every more exciting theory about reconciliation, children, or new relationships with Britain. Now, let's get into the reconciliation question, because it's genuinely central here. Is any of this actually about King Charles? About repairing that specific relationship? It's worth noting that a more independent, non-royal Sussex presence in Britain doesn't require reconciliation with Charles to happen first, but it also doesn't preclude it. In fact, it might make reconciliation easier precisely because it removes some of the institutional pressure. If Harry isn't framing his UK presence as coming back to the family business, there's less at stake, less protocol to navigate, and arguably more room for an actual father-son relationship to exist without every visit being interpreted as a referendum on royal politics. Let's talk about the children for a moment, because this might genuinely be one of the most underrated threads in the entire story. Archie and Lilibet have grown up almost entirely outside of Britain, disconnected from the country, culture, and extended family that shaped their father's own childhood. If Harry is genuinely building a more independent, sustainable relationship with the UK, one that isn't contingent on royal reconciliation or official duties, that creates a much more realistic path for his children to eventually develop their own connection to Britain too, without that connection being tangled up in palace politics or media circus. A kid can visit their grandfather's country without needing to understand the entire complicated backstory of why that visit is complicated in the first place. Here's the bigger question this whole conversation is really circling. Can Harry and Meghan return to Britain without returning to the life they previously left behind? That's not a small question, and it's worth taking seriously rather than treating as a rhetorical flourish. The entire reason Megxit happened in the first place was a set of specific, deeply personal grievances about royal life, media treatment, and institutional pressure. If Harry starts spending significantly more time in the UK, the obvious worry, for him, for Meghan, for anyone watching closely, is whether that inevitably pulls him back into the exact dynamics he stepped away from in 2020. But maybe that's exactly the wrong way to think about it. If this really is about building something new rather than resuming something old, the entire structure would need to look different from what came before. Different pace, different boundaries, different relationship with media and institution alike. Whether that's actually achievable is genuinely unclear. But the fact that it's even being discussed as a real possibility rather than dismissed outright suggests the conversation around Harry and Meghan has matured somewhat since the earlier, more binary years of this saga. Now, let's talk about Meghan specifically, because she remains, for better or worse, one of the most reaction-generating figures in modern royal coverage. Whatever she does or doesn't do continues to generate outsized commentary, both supportive and critical, in a way that frankly outpaces most other public figures navigating something similar. Is that intensity actually cooling, as some recent public reactions have suggested? Or does it simply ebb and flow, depending on what's currently dominating headlines? It's genuinely hard to say with confidence, but it's a thread worth watching closely, because Meghan's public reception arguably shapes the realistic boundaries of what any UK return could actually look like for the whole family. So where does all this leave us? Somewhere between speculation and genuine signal. Nobody outside the people directly involved actually knows what Harry and Meghan are planning, how far any of this goes, or what timeline it might follow. But the fact that serious commentary, even from unexpected corners like the entertainment world, is increasingly framing this as something more nuanced than a simple comeback or not binary, suggests the public conversation itself is evolving, even if the actual situation remains genuinely uncertain. We want to hear your take on this one. Do you think Harry and Meghan's possible UK return actually makes sense, given everything we know? Do you think the children are one of the biggest driving factors behind this shift? Can Harry realistically reconnect with Britain without ever becoming a working royal again? And do you think any of this could eventually lead to genuine reconciliation with King Charles, or is that a separate conversation entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This is exactly the kind of story where different perspectives genuinely add something, so don't hold back. If this breakdown gave you a new angle to think about, go ahead and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the Royal Truth Desk and turn on notifications, because we'll keep tracking this story as it develops from every angle worth paying attention to. If you'd like to support the kind of independent, thoughtful royal commentary we do here, super thanks is always sincerely appreciated. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.